So how have you been during COVID?
You know, I've got a two-year-old, so that's been a bit of a challenge, and it's been a challenge. It's put a stress. It's like a stress test on everything, on your marriage, your relationship with your kid, and then as far as artistic outlets, it's put a big hamper on that too, and it's been challenging for the whole artistic community, I think, because there's been so few opportunities um, to get together.
Hmm.
In general, it's a collaborative community. So when you take away that ability to collaborate, it's tough for people. But I've been doing all right, doing a lot of writing, producing, that kind of thing.
I think that's the thing where sometimes it feels like personally there are moments where if I felt like I've been the most productive I've been in years, but at the
Sure,
same time there's so many things that I feel like I haven't really been like there's not much proof or in terms of like even with movies like I feel a lot of people are writing stuff but you're not able to make them yet. So there's like more stuff on the back burner as well and it's just
yeah,
waiting.
yeah.
Um
There's going to be a big a big log to get through the turnstile when everything kind of clears up.
yeah, I'm kind of curious about like I know some of it has already started coming out whether it's music or like some movies where um, things that have been made during this time or like written and sort of like the emotions and feelings. I know there's a movie coming out that's supposed to be, I think it's called Songbird, that it's about like COVID if it
Hmm.
mutates in like 4 years or something, and it's interesting. I'm curious how that's gonna play out, but I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, this is also the best. This is the best setup for like the zombie apocalypse movies too. You know what I mean? Not only is it like a new virus, but also a rushed vaccine. Like it's perfect.
Yeah, and
Primer for a zombie movie.
everyone keeps saying like I think oh it's going to it's the only way like 2020 can get worse. Like it's the only thing that's left up its sleeve that hasn't happened yet.
Right,
I
right,
think there
right,
was
right.
some place I saw where like they miscalculated how many people had passed away, but so they like
Hmm.
calculated they gave one extra. So I think on the next day they said that they had a negative one of deaths, and then
Hmm.
everyone was like, "Hold on." I think that's where the zombies started being like, "Is that possible?"
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. So many cases are unreported and deaths are not necessarily related to COVID with the comorbidities and whatnot. And then, so you have a big number that hasn't been accounted for. And on top of that, you have all the things that just being in the lockdown has kind of agitated
Mhm.
people's mental health, issues with addiction. So, that's kind of causation as well, right?
Have you and yours been like watching a lot of TV, movies, Netflix, or something?
No, I mean, my wife and I have watched a little of The Queen's Gambit, because I think Scott Frank's a great writer. So, because I loved, oh, was it Lawless?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that he did. Yeah, that was just so good. But I mean, he's got many great uh, pieces. But yeah, so we've been watching that. Not a ton else for fun. We watched at the beginning. We watched what's the Queen of the South? Because I have a friend. It's like La Reina del Sur, but the Queen of the South is the Americanized version
Uh-huh.
of it. It was just it was silly and fun and just kind of like a silly action thing to watch. And I watched Away, which is the uh, Jessica Goldberg with Hilary Swank when they
Mhm.
are going on the mission to Mars. So I watched that, but not much else. Not much else.
Yeah, that's a thing I see a lot of people either like going towards like essentially comfort food level type of films or some people actually like diving in to try and find as much as they can.
Yeah.
Um,
What about you? Where are you?
I'm in Toronto.
You're in Toronto. Okay.
I'm in
Did
Toronto.
you see this through Nightstream Festival or
No, I saw it at Fantasia.
Fantasia? Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I was able to cover it, and I was kind of glad this came up because it gave me an opportunity to revisit the film and
It's different on a second watching, isn't it?
It's so different, and I've like
Yeah.
appreciated it.
I watched it 3 or 4 times before I was like, I think it's a good film. Like I watched it the first time and it was kind of jarring. The second time I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And then as I kept watching it on multiple times, I was like, oh wow, small things just kept building in a really um, nefarious way, if that makes sense. Like it it acts on you in different ways. It's almost like a Rorschach, like depending on where you are and how you're feeling. But there, there's a lot of great subtlety and uh, specificity, I think, in the film.
It's very dark, but it's also like very funny at some points. I think
Yeah.
I was watching it, and it was a moment that made me wish I'd seen it in a theater. But there was the portion in which they're doing the other example, and they cut away from your character, and it shows the protest scene. And then the narrator sort of like calls him like a communist, and I just had to pause the video for a second, and I was like, I wish that people were watching this in a theater.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got picked up by Alamo Drafthouse. I don't know what that means as far as like if everything's going to be virtual, or you know if at some point they're going to be showing it. I got to see it at CineQuest.
Mm-hmm.
That was where we premiered on a big theater, and that was wonderful. Also, the sound design is so different when you're seeing it on a true 5.1 like big theater sound. It's great. Yeah.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure about for Alamo because I don't know how many of their theaters are open right now. I've always wanted to go to one.
Hmm.
Um, but it's definitely like I think the movie's sort of brilliant because I think at first when I started watching it, especially watching it in the end of August, that there was sort of that the climate of everything in terms of cops, and I was like, is this something that's going to play well? And I think the movie sort of tackles that well, but also not really dealing with that issue because it's like it's
It
showing
wasn't really
different perspectives.
intended.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, and you can't blame it for sort of happening after the fact.
Right.
Um, but it was sort of I think at first I was like I don't know if I want to try and sympathize with a cop, and then by the end of the movie I'm like, oh, I'm absolutely invested. Um,
Hmm.
one thing I sort of had was I felt like was one of the descriptors for your character or like some of the direction you were given was like to act like a Ken doll because I felt that's what sort of how it came off at sometimes.
Well, it was interesting in because I started with Quinn on the short, which was a year and a half, 2 years before we started filming the feature, and so we went through a long back and forth about what it was, who this character was, how is the best way to service the film, and we went down a lot of rabbit holes. Is it Asperger's? Does he have some form of autism so that he doesn't pick up on social cues? And then we kept running into um, the obstacle that unless he's created for the purpose of the film, he's going to have a past. And then you kind of have to deal with the past and what's his backstory and how does that affect the film and how does that affect kind of like this scientific experiment, if you will. It's almost like it's like a litmus test. Like you've got your control and then you've got your whatever is agitated. And so we wanted him to come across as blank slate as possible. So it's really an experience of innocence a journey of innocence to experience. And sorry, I'll turn off my notifications. And that's when we kind of came upon the idea of he's
Mm.
created for this journey, for this specific story. So he's got all the faculties that someone would have, but um, he's created for this journey. That's why at the very beginning you see him as kind of like cookie cutter, put together on that little screen. That horrible art. I love the lo-fi animation in this film, but that way you kind of understand that he is he's pure, he's clean,
Mhm.
he doesn't, he's bringing no bias to this whatsoever.
Which almost in a way is sort of like it sort of is what you would want from a cop, especially in terms of, as we were saying, the climate where you sort of like, whether it's the part where your character comes in and you start making promises to people, and we all know you shouldn't be making promises to in that field. um and it's like the benefit of the doubt while also being super hopeful and optimistic, and everyone just sort of looks at you like, no, you can't.
I think it's the most brilliant, one of the most brilliant parts about the piece is that it's by making him a complete innocent with, you know, sans bias, then uh, you see that the issue is not with the person, but the issue is with the system.
Mhm.
You know, the system is broken, and even the best guy with, you know, perfect intentions and no biases whatsoever will be corrupted because the system is broken. You know, and that and it's pretty systemic. You know, from the housing shelters to um, to the courts to financial assistance. Um, you know, the most dangerous time when a woman or anyone comes out against an abuser is when they decide to leave. You know, and that is really amplified by this piece, I think.
It definitely, I keep going back to the moment in which you have a conversation with, I believe, Lauren, the daughter's character, and afterwards you sort of have
In the car or in the interrogation or
an
in the
interrogation room.
that long shot of the two
Yeah,
shot. Yeah.
and then afterwards you're just sort of like weeping in the hallway, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just so powerful because there are moments I feel like there are definitely police officers who like hold on to it and then you can't hold on to it, like they're like these things that will, there's no way that it won't affect you in the long run, and especially
Yeah.
that first year. um
Yeah.
it's harder for like it comes so much more as a shock to some people.
Yeah, and it's interesting what the film does, because for me that was a, obviously that was a pretty tough day. Like we went pretty deep in that breakdown scene, and Quinn decided just to go from a wide shot just so you kind of see the bodies. But you know, we had done that over and over in multiple shots and like close and whatnot, and it was heartbreaking. And then what's interesting is when you hard cut to Stacy Keach and his kind of grim face being like, yeah, I think we've gotten off track. Like it becomes a comic moment,
Hmm.
right? Because you need a break from how dire it is. And so I think the first time that I was in a theater with a bunch of people and I saw that, I was like, oh, fuck, that didn't land how I wanted it to land. Like, and then I realized, no, it landed exactly how it was supposed to land, because they need a break from the tension. The audience needs a release because it's brutal.
I think Keach is like used perfect in this film.
He's so good.
There's like, whether it's the narrations or even, I think I'll get to it more later, but the final, once the credits roll and it sort of it stops being like the old 80s VHS sort of type thing, and it becomes into like the full aspect ratio and such. It's, I keep thinking about the scene in which where he like sort of tells you, he's like, oh, you're going to grow up, or like you're going to then hurt your children because that's reality of it. And then he walks out and he goes, but this isn't real. And he like snaps his finger and it goes back into the movie. And I had like chills watching it and thinking about it even now too.
Mm-hmm.
There's one portion in which you're being taught like how to arrest or something, or like dealing with the knife fight, the
Yeah.
training, and you sort of go and you're like, well, I'm going to do the 5 components of arrest, and then they fast forward. Did you have to do the
Yeah.
entire speech, or was it you just started
Yeah,
saying?
I had to do the entire speech. I had to do. I had to, I had to memorize like 2 pages worth of stuff. And I was like, if I had known that you were just gonna, you know, fast forward, I would have just been like watermelon, watermelon, rutabaga, rutabaga. But yeah, no, I mean, it was very funny, but I was like, I had so much language there, but it worked. It worked.
When did you find out? Was it after like the first cut when you're watching it with the audience, or beforehand?
I watched it with, I think I watched it with my wife first. Um, yeah, and it was an early cut. It was before, I think it was before the picture was locked, but I think they were still doing some stuff with sound. Um, but yeah, so I watched it then, and I was like, "What the? Okay, it's funny, fine."
I think it's a movie that definitely a lot more people, and I'm hoping one reason why I'm glad to like do this for this week um, is that I feel like I'm every year I sort of come up with my best of list and I tell people, and there's like 5, 10 movies that people haven't heard of.
Mhm,
And I felt lucky enough to watch this at Fantasia. And if it wasn't for that, I don't know if I would when I would have heard about it as well.
mhm.
But I really want more people to see this because I think there's so much like nuance in a lot of things. Your performance in the scene where your character, your wife's character, leaves you, and you just start like still monotonely sort of responding, and like as she leaves, and you just say, "Please don't leave, please don't leave." It's heartbreaking, and it's really powerful work, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah, that scene was one of the ones that I originally auditioned with. So that was kind of like I just loved that scene from the beginning of the whole process. The scene that I didn't, the scene that that the editor just did a fantastic job with was the scene when you're kind of close up on Jim's face and you're almost in this pale black and white, and it starts to like, and he's you can see him like maybe like he's talking to a shrink or something, and like that how they edited that and what they did with it, it ruined me. I thought that was just so I thought that was really beautiful. But the other scene like that is the scene with his wife. It's just like things are starting to unravel, things are starting to break down, and he is kind of like misfiring. You know, I mean, if he you could think of him as an android there, and he's just kind of like you know,
Mm.
or it's just that he does. It's like he doesn't know how to compute the moment. You know.
It's that's
And
why
I
it's
appreciate that. I appreciate you wanting to have other people see it. I really do. You know, we didn't expect as many people to see it as already have, so we're really feeling really positive and fortunate about it. I would love this to be just a little darling film that finds a home somewhere and gets a really wide audience. I don't know if that will ever happen, but you know, that would be my dream. So, and it's interesting to see people's reactions to it. Um, there are some people like you who just absolutely love it and embrace it, and there are others who are just like discount it immediately, being like it misses the moment. It is, you know, it's not talking about race and it's not talking about police in a way that post George Floyd you should talk about that. And you know, the film like wrapped 2 years ago.
mhm.
You know, so it's interesting for me to see because there were certain film festivals like Slam Dance and Austin, I think it was. They didn't want to touch anything with police, so we they basically told us you would get in here, but we're not doing anything with police. And then Austin was canceled, but Slam Dance would have been nice. Um, but at the same time, like it really been interesting for me to have friends and family watch it and for them to say, no, this is actually a great film for right now because while it doesn't, it if it tried to address the moments post George Floyd, it would probably do a bad job.
Mhm.
It's so complex, and this in a way addresses some of the issues and addresses the fact that this is an issue that um, existed way before the final eruption of George Floyd and with the you know the it being in the zeitgeist, and in that way it is completely relatable. Again, I think it's what you bring to it, you know.
And also like the movie is based, is it the 80s with the Reagan era, right?
Yeah,
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 so again, it's also something that if it was modern day, then maybe some more people could sort of try and bring up uh, the fact that it should be saying something about what's going on. But
mm-hmm.
you're giving us a moment of that era, that sadly is still relevant today. So I think
Right.
that's what is um, that's what matters. I remember reading somewhere that like the more specific you make something, the more general it appeals to everyone. Um, and I think that also goes like when you sort of show certain aspects of the past that haven't changed, right? I don't know if
Mhm.
you had seen Spike Lee's Black Klansman,
Yeah,
uh, but the end that film is not based in modern day. But at the end, it has that sequence where it cuts to modern and to what happened, like I think a month prior to the film when it came out, and he's showing us how things haven't changed, right?
mhm.
So I think that sort of, as long as the film isn't trying to say there is no problem. It's definitely saying there's a lot of problems, and the whole sequence at the end sort of does go into the realism of how much trouble that is and how there are corrupt cops, and whether that is because the system corrupted them prior or they went in pre-corrupted,
Right,
um, isn't the issue. It's the issue is that they're there and that needs to change.
right.
So the film shot, you said 2 years ago, and then there was a short. How were you initially like actually brought into the whole thing?
Honestly, it was like it was a blind audition. I saw a notice online. I read the character description and kind of like the synopsis. I was like, this sounds weird, kind of fun. And then I just submitted for it, and I went in and I did the audition and clicked with Colin, the producer, and Quinn immediately. And you know, from there on, it was just kind of like, great, we'd like you to do the short. And they kept me on the hook saying, this is a proof of concept really for a feature that we want to do. And I've been in the boat multiple times where that means like, okay, they're probably going to replace you with like a name actor or something like that. Like Jake Gyllenhaal is going to come in and I'm sure he'll do a great job. And you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
and, and then I told Quinn, I said, listen, I really like this and I really would like to dedicate myself to this, but I would love to be able to do the feature as well. And we just kind of made an agreement that I would have right of first refusal unless their budget, you know, passed a certain threshold, which would mean that it was a completely different thing altogether. So it was great because we ended up having like a 3-year collaboration on this piece. You know?
That's always good to hear, because then I'm sure like in the future, anytime he might have something, you guys still might talk about any upcoming projects, and you probably already have, especially in, like I said, in a potential productive year like this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not like everyone's favorite things are like Scorsese and Leo, or Scorsese and De Niro, and like all these director actor combos that sort of just keep on going. If it brings good stuff, then that's, and people are loving each other and during the time.
Yeah.
Is there any upcoming projects that you have that you want to talk about?
As far as things that I've shot, no, I mean, I did a couple of television episodes that I think already aired. I'm not sure if one's going to air, but no, I'm writing a lot. So I've been working on. I've got 2 pilots that I've written, and I'm also working on an animated piece with a friend. But you know, that's all not to be shared yet. It's
That's
been a
fair.
writing year. It's been a writing year. You know, it's just been like hunkered down, a bunch of writing happening and producing. I'm producing a lot of couple independent pieces. There's two, actually 3 animated pieces that I'm producing because I started working with a company called Capacitor. It's a
Okay.
production company, and they're like 70% in the kids space. So I came in on it as a kind of a development producer with them, and just been, you know, bringing in some talented people who don't uh, who haven't had other opportunities yet. So because so many people, I kind of came up through the New York theater. I went to NYU grad acting, and afterwards I just worked my way through off Broadway to Broadway, regional, you know, and made a lot of great connections. And the theater community is interesting in that a lot of the times in the theater community you can not not understand that. Well, how do I say this? People in theater often discount their worth, meaning like they don't understand that the work that they do if they were doing it in Hollywood, they could be paid quite handsomely for it. So I wanted to seek out certain writers that I thought were just constantly doing consistently good work, who had not moved to Hollywood yet, or done anything on such a broad scale, and see if I could, help them start their careers or progress their careers.
That's great. I think 9 out of 10 times, at any single time, like there's the big mainstream film that sort of comes out, there's obviously a few like of the bigger directors or so that I might follow, but I've always been more fascinated with the indies and what they have to say, and or even like just early showcases of talent. Like there's a bunch of films that you can watch right before someone's big break, and I remember seeing Short Term 12 prior to everything, and that cast is amazingly stacked with it. Like everyone in there's now a star in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people are sort of like, where do these people come from? And they're like, they're putting in the work, you're just not looking.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the case for a lot of people too. And also, you said something interesting about like liking the independence. And I think there's the reason independent film is so great, I think, is that you can do more. You can be more honest, you can be more specific, you can tell your own story without having so many cooks in the kitchen. You don't have to, because most of the time the money that you're bringing to it is your own money that you've kind of scrounged together. You don't really have to answer to anybody else. Whereas when you start doing these big productions and multi-million-dollar things, it's like, all right, what are your notes? All right, what are your notes? Okay, how am I going to say what I want with all your notes?
Yeah, exactly. Until you finally get to that upper like echelon of like directors who sort of show up and they're like, this is what I want to do, and they're like, okay, great, go make it. But then even I think it was like Silence with Scorsese, like famously he couldn't make that forever, and he's one of the biggest names possible. And then on the
Yeah,
other hand, you have Clint Eastwood, who shows up in like middle of November saying, here's my film, and they're like, great, we'll put it out next month, and then it's
yeah,
out.
yeah,
um so it's definitely weird, to much as everyone can admire the industry, but like I think as much as independent has sort of more, not more, but potentially more hoops to like jump through sometimes in terms of making your own money or trying to finance the projects, there's definitely a lot more to say in there typically than some of the other films.
yeah. How long have you been reviewing?
About 5 years.
And are you doing it for a publication, or do you do it for yourself?
For myself, it sort of, we started off as a podcast with a friend of mine when we would see whatever new movie of the week, and we would sort of like have a conversation of it, sort of to mimic the post walking out of the theater conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was just for us to like do something on the side and have fun with it, and eventually it led to us starting our own site and then starting a new one, and then just been doing it since.
That's great.
And it's been me and the rest of our team has been another good side of COVID for us was that there's been a lot more films that feel have been coming out, so they keep, and everything's digital, or mostly digital, so they're just like,
Yeah.
here, do you want to watch this, do you want to watch this, and we're like, we would love to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's a good perk of this whole time.
We have to find the bright sides spots wherever we can.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for sitting and talking with me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. And thanks for all your help in promoting the film, and really appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right, you as well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.